Compliance is a profession where people work tirelessly to make the world a better place. And there are hundreds of amazing and inspiring women who have helped the field develop into what it is today. Great Women in Compliance is part of the Compliance Podcast Network, so join Mary Shirley and Lisa Fine as they talk with women in compliance who are making a difference.
Hi, you're listening to the Great Women in Compliance podcast on the Compliance Podcast Network, hosted by Lisa Fine and Mary Shirley. We are also sponsored by Corporate Compliance Insights. I'm Lisa Fine, and today I have a special episode because Mary and I are here talking about our experiences right now during the coronavirus era. I think of it a bit as an era because we're now living through it for a long time. And Mary and I both really are sitting down. It's a Saturday night for me in Washington, D.C., and a Sunday morning for her in New Zealand, and we just thought it would be good to talk about some of the stuff that we're going through, and hopefully that'll resonate with all of you, and also just give you a sense of two compliance professionals dealing with it both in terms of our work life and our real life. And with that, I'm going to turn to Mary to start talking about how this has really been impacting you and your work and just generally what's been going on with you.
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. Well, I think many of you have heard me speak very positively about being an expat. Moving to Singapore 10 years ago was a huge turning point for me, both personally and professionally. But there can be issues when you live in a different country, and I'm experiencing the bad timing of some of that right now. So just before things got really bad in the United States, my visa is up for renewal, my work visa, and you need to exit the United States, your physical presence, and interview at an overseas consulate for your renewal. And it's often your home country. So for me, I've arrived back in New Zealand, and we sent me early because we feared what if there was a lockdown and my visa expired while being stuck in the United States. So I very hurriedly left the United States in the first third of March and have been home living with my mother ever since. And one of the concerns for me is that shortly after I arrived, the cases of coronavirus in New Zealand started picking up. And we went into a lockdown, a 4-week lockdown fairly soon after I arrived. And the ramifications for me are that the visa interview that I had scheduled in Auckland, which would have been this last week, of course it was cancelled. Sorry, it would have been this week coming. It had been cancelled. And of course the US Embassy, as with almost everything else apart from essential services, has been shut down. And so I'm getting a little nervous now as my visa comes up for renewal, as every day goes by. And what that means is that when that does happen, that my company can't legally pay me and I can't legally work, and I'm still servicing my very expensive apartment in Boston during this time. And of course, there are a lot of people suffering hugely more than I am. But this is just the current situation that I'm in. So it's a little bit different. The timing was terrible. And I thought just generally I'd share a little bit about how the lockdown differs because, Lisa, you and I were in a conversation with some compliance professionals across mainly the United States, but also of one of our friends who's domiciled in London, I suppose, or had been until very recently. And what I quickly realized is that the pandemic rules were very different, even within the different areas of the United States and geographically. So I just thought I'd share for those of you who are listening from the United States, we are, I think, under a bit of a stricter lockdown in New Zealand. So all restaurants and bars are closed completely. We're not even open for drive-through, takeaways and delivery. So in New Zealand, the whole country is eating freshly made homemade meals, and everyone's cooking from scratch. So along with toilet paper, one of the things that we've sold out of in the New Zealand supermarkets is flour, because a lot of people are turning to baking. It's got two benefits. One is that it helps with continuing to educate your children, and it also means that you can reduce your trips to the supermarket if you're able to to survive a little, a bit more from another day or so with some of your baked goodies. So that's the day-to-day life experience of me out here in New Zealand. How is it for you, Lisa?
We've gotten to a stricter point. I'm in Washington, D.C., so it's a surreal. I think throughout the U.S., we've gotten to a stricter point everywhere, although it is strange how it varies from state to state. Personally, in the state of Georgia, they finally have a shutdown, but the governor there decided to open the beaches. And then some of the local mayors for those beaches are like, please don't let that happen. So we have some different things. For me personally, it's essentially a stay at home. We do have food delivery and food pickup that you can do. And part of the reason I think some people will do that is, other than, for nutrition, is that this is like helping, some people's sole source of income. I think the economy and a lot of the gig economy is hit home here. For me personally, from a work standpoint, I was able to work from home, but it's just different now when you can't go into your office. And the idea of Zoom happy hours or Zoom get-togethers are good. It's a truly taking social distancing correctly is a challenge, but I do see people in DC generally doing pretty well with it. I have kind of an outdoor space which I can use in front of my where I will go outside, and it was interesting just as we'll talk about some of that other stuff later. I was outside trying to exercise, and there was a guy next to me like drinking a lot of beers and smoking a lot of cigarettes. It hit home that a lot of people are handling it, their own way.
Right.
I do, like right now, it's a Saturday night, have a glass of wine at home on my own, which is not something that I normally don't, drink at home that much. But sometimes now at the end of the day, you can't go out, you can't do this, after you exercise, what else? So, but I think people are really starting to get it here, and you will see now people just wearing more and more masks outside, and and it has become a new norm. I think the other thing that is, I was watching something on TV the other day, and the people were, just at a normal table close to each other and going out. And I'm like, have they forgot social distancing? And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this was from like 9 years ago. It wasn't like a news report, but it's just interesting to adapt that way. So I think, so one of the other things though, for you professionally, particularly being in healthcare, talk a little bit about that part of it for you. I know we'll get back into real life too, but you have a very specific area that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this topic will be hopefully helpful for some of our colleagues who work as compliance vendors. One of the things that I've seen over the last several days, especially in healthcare, but not limited to, has been compliance professionals really concerned about vendors approaching them at this time to have a chat about them selling their services. And I'm hoping that when I share some of what is really the tip of the iceberg for companies like mine in terms of how our world has changed and the sheer amount of extra work that we do, that maybe this will give some people who are vendors some insight into why implying that someone has plenty of free time to shoot the breeze with you right now while you do your business development, why that's not going to go down so well. So for companies who already have patients, and for ours it's dialysis, those services must continue. They are, of course, an essential service. And so what are our considerations towards our staff who still must go to work? How are we protecting them? How can we work with HR to ensure childcare for our frontline staff? How do we make the clinic and hospital environments as safe as possible for patients? Do we need isolation areas? How are we going to arrange for those? Dialysis patients often have a support person sitting in the treatment room with them. We now need to adjust so much for the new considerations here. And of course, as you can imagine, every time the business is thinking about making changes, compliance is roped in. And so even though compliance may not be executing as such on a lot of these areas, they're still going to be advising, or they're still going to be looped in and attending the meetings in case their advice is needed. And then another area for us is telehealth. telehealth has been fabulous in terms of a developing area, but that's the key part, right? It's developing. So there are a lot of regulations around it. There are some areas of healthcare that are better suited to telehealth than others. Dermatology is a great example of something that works really well with telehealth services. And of course, as a remote service, a lot of companies are turning more and more to how they can transfer some of the in-person services that they've been doing to a telehealth environment. But of course, it's not permitted for everything right now. So maybe companies are going to the government, they may be asking for waivers. And in this era where people are looking to make extended use of telehealth in these circumstances, it means that they may be treading on new ground. And of course, compliance is going to be right there at the side of our colleagues to go through that new process. And then the third thing that I wanted to talk about, and again, I reiterate, this is really just the tip of the iceberg for companies in this kind of realm. So licensure. In New Zealand, we've put a call out recently to retired healthcare professionals, asking them to volunteer and help out during the crisis. Now, a lot of these people won't be currently licensed. And then in the United States, for example, there are a lot of healthcare professionals who may be licensed in one state, but maybe not currently practicing in the state that they're living in, and they don't have a valid license for that state. So how can we overcome this current call to arms, which is really important, but also balancing compliance risk with life and death needs? So those are some of the areas. Lisa, what about licensure for you guys?
You know, it's so interesting because I was about to jump in and talk about that as well. And I'm in education, but at Pearson, but one of the other parts of our business that's very large is standardized and assessment tests and licensing exams. So obviously, you know, sometimes there's a feeling that, okay, since now a lot of standardized tests have been pushed back, or waived for a year or something, you know, what else is going on? But one of the things that we are trying to do from essential services is, for example, somebody who finished nursing school is going to need to be licensed for the first time, and particularly so, you know, it's basically a two-part thing. How do we do those tests? It's very hard to, you know, right now those need to be done and proctored in specific ways in person. So you're dealing with making sure you can do those. Some states are more interested in others. On the other hand, we're trying to figure out what can be virtual. But if something needs to be in person, you know, and there are certain things, how do you make sure you get somebody who is going to proctor it? What do? You know, make sure it's socially distant, do all these things right. And also, you know, make sure we're trying to help on what the right issues and the right things are. So, you know, I think that was a really interesting fact to me. And also, will a state consider it an essential service? Or, you know, how is that? Or what should be waived? So, I mean, I think from that standpoint, we see that as the life or death side. For the other part of it, you know, our education is, how do we help students? I have to say, I've been really proud of the way Pearson has handled things in terms of basically putting out resources for everybody, for students and in college and graduate students, have opened up libraries, have done a lot of things, and have really tried to do the right things, especially with some of our online schools that people may now want to join or learn more about. At the same time, the volume has changed. So, you know, we're both trying to do the right things as a business, but first and foremost, and I can say throughout, the company wants to do the right thing to help people get their education to get time. And I've just, it's been pretty cool to watch as that played out, or even to hear, you know, leaders talk about things for us as employees for the company that have been really good. But before I talk a little bit about that, I think the hard part, to circle back to your vendor point of it, is that in the middle of all this, you know, there are certain things I think that are auto sent out, and, you know, you're like, this is a follow-up. Can you let me know who at your company does X, Y, and Z? Or people saying, you know, trying to sell me something, you know, related to, you know, a third-party due diligence program or something else. And not things, and not that we don't really appreciate it normally, but there's a feeling of, you know, be sensitive to, the way, at least for me, the way I manage time or deal with time or my priorities have changed in the last 3 weeks or a month.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't suddenly, we're all trying to deal with a new reality. So, on the one hand, so sometimes learning about a new product when you're just trying to help and do all the right things can kind of feel like a lot and a little, if the intentions are good, but sometimes you'll just look and think, really, today?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And that's a little bit of, my take on it. We're all doing the right things for our business, for our friends, for our families, and for our mental health. And, when you feel like even by inadvertently somebody's looking at you like you're a dollar sign potentially for the future, it just feels different.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's how you feel about it.
Yeah, that's probably how I feel even outside of a pandemic. And the link that I make there is, there are some people who are very, very polite when they're pitching to you, and as soon as you can't do anything for them, then they're disgusted and they don't want to have anything further to do with you. And so it becomes clear pretty quickly who the people are who are genuinely looking to build long-term relationships and understand that the pipeline for sales exists for a reason. Sales are typically not instant. So yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And then looking at the other side, of course, I think there is acknowledgement that, of course, sales roles, the people in those, they're also looking to stay afloat at this time.
Yeah.
And we get that. But I'm not going to ignore working on some kind of rearrangement of medical services issue that I'm working with the business in order to say, oh, well, I'm just going to politely listen to a due diligence pitch because he's got to make a living too. That kind of prioritization is insane. So I think there is, again, it has to be a balancing while recognizing that everyone's just trying to do their best right now, thinking about what it might be like for the customers will probably help those in sales roles at the moment.
Yeah. And I think just to top that up, I wouldn't want anyone to think it's not that, I've heard from people that I've worked with, vendors, others, and they're just like, we're just checking in and we're sensitive to what's going on with you right now. If you let me know. I actually have to say, I love that. I think and it's very thoughtful. And I think that, I don't want anyone to take out from this. It's not, don't call, just
right. Yeah, exactly.
Just keep it in mind. I love that. I love that. And as a, I will remember that in the future.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So I was just going to say, I think, and some have taken a step additional to that. So some people have put together sort of checklists or guidance for companies, that are specific to this situation right now. Some of the ones that we've seen on LinkedIn are things like, how to work the most effectively, work from home, that kind of thing. If it's very much related and it will help people, or maybe you've created a training that a lot of them have been done complimentary right now, and so people are sending those out. Maybe thinking about privacy and security concerns for your workforce now that people are at home, and using technology from home. What are some of the, Zoom we talked about as being something that's been infiltrated quite a bit right now. So maybe awareness in that space is going to be really helpful. But I think there's a very big difference between reaching out for what is almost certainly, chit chat for no reason because they see that as being, oh, this is great, this is building our relationship so I can sell stuff, versus genuine care and interest and something that's helpful to companies right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that one of the other things that reminded me of is that, for us, I think, at least for me, some of my work has really focused in the last month. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of things that we were planning to do over the next few months related to some gifts and hospitality training and other things with people. And as I joke around with people regularly, if we have people bringing, hospitality to their homes and feeding them during this, we have a lot larger problems than just a pure, compliance issue. But I'll joke aside about that, it's also an opportunity for us as compliance professionals to be able to truly support our business, because we always want people, or at least I do, we're here to help you. And you're changing, and what can we do, the same way, there are a couple of different, we could take that view of, well, this is a good time to talk to some of the people who may have more time at home about the things that are important to us. And I think strategically, and just in terms of being a good coworker, a good colleague, to kind of take the opposite approach, which is, what is coming up for you right now that you think might be an issue? What do you think we could be aware of? Like, I'm working with our internal audit and others. We were supposed to do some work this spring, and we're still talking to the same business group from the business, and we're talking about what they think might be issues now, and how do we look at that, and how do we work with them for what they may think are compliance issues right now. And I really think that they took a kind of a breath of relief when they realized that instead of us trying to impose what we were planning to do 2 months ago on them, but sort of adapting to this, I think it makes a big difference in our work and our credibility for once when the crisis comes to an end, that people really do know that when we come back to some of the work we need to do, they're going to understand and realize we recognized what was happening when it was happening too. So I think it's a good time to shake ourselves out of it a little as well.
That's a great point. Another one that comes to mind for me is the understanding that people are really fraught right now. So just in my example, I have limited time in which I can work for the company before my visa's up, which means I'm really prioritizing what needs to be done now, and then I essentially go on hiatus and can't help anymore. So I'm super stressed about that. Other people are super stressed about a parent being hospitalized due to coronavirus. Other people are really concerned that layoffs have started happening in their company. And so what this means is that nerves are frayed. People are even more sensitive at the moment than they might ordinarily be. And because you don't know what the trigger or the pain point is for people right now, it means that approaches from companies or colleagues, even to colleagues internally, need to be super sensitive. And that idea of thinking, being really thoughtful about how can I start working now that'll help us in the future, but also what can I do to help my colleagues who might be suffering from an immense degree of stress related to this issue. How are we helping those colleagues and making this time easier for them?
The other thing, I try to do this both in personal life and a little bit at work, is to just drop a quick email or text to people that I just hi, just thinking of you, can I help? And sometimes I think with some people at work, they're just so happy to get like an email where someone isn't asking for something. Keep up the spirit. But everyone figures out, their own approaches to those things. But we are as we go along. And I think it is a real opportunity for all of us to be able to be of value. And also, on the compliance side, keeping your eye out for new issues that might arise,
right.
There are going to be some people out there that want to take advantage of this and to kind of suddenly do that. But I think we can do that. Now, let me ask you a completely different question. Unless I think there's anything else about our organizations, because I want to know what you're reading and watching right now.
So just before I left, I was very fortunate. I ordered a couple of books. So while I packed hurriedly, I do have some reading materials with me. So what I selected was Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. I've just started getting into that one. It's actually a really quite a serious toned or themed issue, this one. So this is related to how we can best utilize our communication when we don't have the background of other people and understand the huge effects that not communicating effectively can have. Big fan of him generally. And then the second book, which I haven't started yet, is Presence by Amy Cuddy, and you'll remember her as being the psychologist who has the second most viewed TED Talk around. So I'm really looking forward to that one. In terms of watching, I am every night, my mum and I are holding a Netflix movie night as time to unwind, and I'm very old school. I joined Bones, the forensic anthropologist crime series, really late in the game. And so I started watching it very late. So I'm starting that from scratch now and going through it. So a little boring, that one. What about you, Lisa?
From the book side, there are a couple books I've read recently where I'm in the middle of. One is one that was recommended by our chief legal officer to his leadership team, and they really liked it. It's called Competing in the Age of AI, and it has a lot of different examples and things about artificial intelligence, where it works, where it doesn't from a business standpoint. I'm getting through it. I would like to say I was going more quickly than I really am on it, but it's got good examples from large companies and things like that. And I just think it's really interesting to see the evolution of that. The rest of what I'm reading right now, the other book that I just finished is very different. It's called The Silent Patient. It's on the bestseller list. It's a really interesting story about a woman who was, interesting. It's going to sound really kind of depressing, but who was convicted or was put into an institution after murdering her husband. She's an artist, and it's a story about her and a therapist who's trying to help her. But it just has lots. It's like a thriller, and it has twists and turns. And I actually didn't. Usually I feel like I catch on to some of those, and this one was, really just hit me at the end. So I thought that was really good and fun. I'm trying to read some stuff that's a little less, other than my AI book. I know I want to read this new Glennon Doyle Untamed, but I haven't gotten to that yet. In terms of things on TV, I have just started watching Ozark. I was late to that, and it's really good. I'm getting caught up. I'm only in season 1, but I'm really enjoying that. Also would recommend, I watched Watchmen on HBO, and I'm not a huge comic book person or anything like that, but I think that show, it's going to be one season so well. It's from the U.S. And the other one, which would be for a podcast of its own, is, I will admit to who's ever listening now, I did watch Tiger King, and wow, I still don't know what to say about it. I watched it. And let me just tell you, I'm still amazed by the whole thing. Like, it's just, I feel like the one thing that's really united people throughout the U.S., watching Tiger King. It's bizarre and randomly fascinating, but I think everybody who's watched it right now is laughing. I'm sure some people may be rolling their eyes, but really, it's something. So
I've got to get onto that.
My mother, from my parents who have had to try to, now they're very good about staying at home and are pretty much mastered FaceTime. We're on to Zoom now. My mother said, watching Tiger King. So I'm prepared for that. So
that's great.
For you also, sort of, what is something, we talk about that, what's something that's made you feel good during all of this, or a silver lining or a surprise or something that's made you, feel good about people, humanity or something?
Yeah, there's been a couple of really nice things for me. So externally, there has been a call for students in the UK to come out and volunteer to ensure that vulnerable people are getting deliveries of essentials. And they had a massive response to that. It was so heartwarming. And, I might be a bit biased because I'm a millennial, but I feel like there is a bit of a reputation for millennials as being super self-absorbed. And the number of young folk who put their hand up and said, yeah, I'm absolutely willing and able to do this. So I'm going to help, even though I might be putting myself at risk, but I'm going to help out the community. That really made my heart smile. And then in New Zealand, we have similar. There is a website called stuff.co.nz, which I don't recommend, as the journalism is not so strong, and there's a lot of spelling and grammar mistakes often in the articles. But there is a section in there which is called Neighbourly, and the idea of it is that you can leave messages for people, like if there's a lost cat and you want to advertise that you found a cat, does anyone own this cat? But people were also volunteering on that and saying, if anyone out there needs grocery deliveries, send me your list and I will go out and get that for you. That kind of thing, that coming together of community just really thrilled me when, at a time when I think we had some societal decline and I was getting a little nervous for the future, but this has really uplifted me and given me renewed hope. What about you?
I mean, I would say also, I mean, I live in a building, and just the number of people who put up notes or have put them on the virtual board, people going out of their way to help each other. I think there's things like, when I've seen, in the restaurant community, for example, there's a thing in DC, the virtual tip jar, where you have a list of lots of people that are out of work, and there are people who basically every time they go get something from their refrigerator, that somebody put together a randomizer so you can go give a tip to somebody who's a bartender or a server who's out of work. I mean, I just think like ways that people are trying to help each other that are part of the day-to-day life of communities as the reality hits has been, really inspiring. I also think the whole thing where you see the teddy bears, I don't know if you've seen this, but
yes,
the idea
in New Zealand as well.
It just makes me happy to think people are doing that, for kids and for stuff like that. I mean, I think it really is the sense that people are really trying to take care of each other, and where I think that's been lost. I think that's been, a really a good part of it, and the people, and everybody reaching out to other people. I think has been having each other's back.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I'm sure you've experienced this too. I have noted a real uptick in the messages of outreach, and even just the sharing of funny memes, the little jokes. Everyone has been in touch way more frequently than usual, and I'm loving that this has brought people together not only as a community, but also that everyone's showing that the friendships around them still mean something. There's a lot of checking in across all the different geographical borders in my network. There are people sharing funny things. There is sharing of tips. And I'm loving just the fact that, remote, it just doesn't replace those in-person catch-ups that we have. But, with the resources that we do have, people are really stepping up and reminding everyone around them that they care. And I've really felt happy about the messages that I've received, and being able to send a lot out myself. Similar situation in your network?
I mean, I feel that too. I mean, I think it's sort of like how we're trying to stay social, when we're socially distancing, how do we still connect with people? What works? And I think people really are reaching out for that. I mean, I've been so, I felt almost honored by the people, because I'm single, people who've really reached out just to make sure I'm okay. And sometimes I feel like everyone's reaching out so much that I'm talking more than I did.
For sure.
It makes me feel very supported in a larger world. Even if I didn't necessarily need that, I'm like, wait a minute, this is kind of special in that way.
Exactly.
I mean, I'd love to give one of these people a hug, but that's really not happening right now. But if for anybody, I think that, being able to do that. And I've, been able to reach out to some other people who, moved to DC recently or feel on their own. It's been able to be helpful for them. So it makes me feel good. We're focusing on what's important. So that's, is the people and people we love and people who have, out there and people who need us. And I think bigger society. And I think that's good.
Totally agree.
So one last thing. So what other things, what are you doing kind of just for yourself other than your, watching? What are you doing for yourself?
Yeah. And I initially read this question when we were talking about this episode as being, what are you doing in terms of additional activities and things? And I'm actually doing the opposite. So as you know about me, I am very responsive. I feel a great need to respond to messages promptly, to be on top of things.
Really? I never knew.
And so in this time, staying with my mom, I've put my phone to the side a lot more than I normally would. And part of that is the relief of not being in the same time zone as many of my colleagues. New Zealand is like the worst. We're the first country to see the sun every day, which is lovely, but it's also crazy in terms of the fact that we're a German company. I have a global role for half of my time. So making the time zones work is impossible with certain combinations of people. And so I actually feel now a great almost sense of relief. Like I hadn't realized how much I'd put pressure and expectations on myself to be always on the ball, right? Like always dependable if someone needs an answer. And so I don't have that pressure right now. And what I've learned from this is that when I'm back in an environment where I don't have this time zone advantage / disadvantage, I'm going to be a lot better, I think, about not needing my phone in my hand the entire time. So I've gone back to an easier life, I think. The home-cooked meals, talking to my mom, having that routine of our day. For me, I've gone the opposite way. So I have not put pressure on myself to try and learn something new at this time. I feel pretty busy with work and just trying to survive, I guess. And I know that sounds weird because I'm not in a life or death situation, but I do feel a great deal of stress about my current work situation in terms of not being able to contribute when my work visa expires and just being a giant pain and inconvenience to the company, essentially for being foreign. And I've never felt like I needed to apologize for being foreign before, but now is the time when I do. I feel really bad about the fact that this is going to cause trouble and inconvenience to others. So in light of that, taking a really relaxed approach as much as possible and not taking on new things right now beyond what I can reasonably do. That has been my approach. But I think you have been a lot better about maintaining your exercise routine, which has completely fallen by the wayside for me.
Well, yeah, no, that I've still gotten. I was, being my attempt to eat very healthy has had some ups and downs. Who hasn't? But I do think, for me, I agree. I haven't picked up a new skill or anything, but I have been one of the people now doing jigsaw puzzles. I find like the small accomplishment of getting that to move and to be done, like that's just something that will help me with the stress and the uncertainty of other things. So for me, that's been one of those things that when you finish it, you feel a sense of accomplishment, but it doesn't really matter if I do it tomorrow, tonight, or next week. And I really sometimes just thinking and focusing on that for a little while has been good. In terms of my exercise routine, like that I've been good about, mostly because I have friends in the fitness community, many of whom have lost their jobs, like we were talking about earlier with restaurants, and they're trying to do classes online. So I'm trying to contribute to those both, to pay for classes when gym memberships and other things are frozen, because that's what helped me with stress when in normal times. So I feel like it's I certainly am not going to plug or be a vendor, but if anybody that's listening to this wants to reach out, I know a lot of people who would always appreciate anyone from anywhere who'd want to do a Zoom class or an Instagram class or things like that. I think them, their complete living was just closed one day, and almost all of them have can't do it. So partially my exercise routine is good for my sanity. Partially it keeps me accountable because I have people I know who I say I'm going to show up. So. And other than that, I think I work what I'm now calling farmer's hours, because if it's rainy, I'll work more. I'm a little more fluid. I'm nice and it's warm. I'm going to go outside for a little while. I'm socially distanced appropriately. But, like you said, since the time for things are different for work, I want to do what I can to make it, a little bit easier, for me. So I wouldn't say I'm going to come out of this knowing another language or being like, in the best shape of my life, because none of that's true. But I'm doing things to make the days better and trying to help people I know in my community who are struggling, not just, but others. And that's given me a feeling of a little bit of purpose outside of the stuff related to my work in this time that can feel purposeless. But I think that's pretty much for me. I don't know if you have anything else, you want to share.
No, I'd just say in a way, I've had a blessing out of this. I haven't lived in New Zealand for 10 years. This is the most time I've spent with my mom for, I can't say as long as I can remember, of course, but it's been like the most meaningful amount of time that I've been able to spend with her and getting back to that kind of family life routine, even though the family unit looks different to when I left it.
Right.
When I first left home, when I bought my own little place, it has been a really lovely silver lining. So I'd end on that, Lisa.
Well, hug your mom for me.
Thank you.
And, I also think before we leave, all you guys, I think both of us also feel really grateful for our compliance community and for those of you who reached out to us or other people. I want to say, thank you to all of you guys, and to keep taking advantage of people that through this or other things, just to check in and say hi. Because, I think to close off, in my view, we all have to be here for each other in all different ways. If there's one thing I know both you and I are very proud of, is the fact that there is a community of people that we engage with and that listen to this and have gotten to know one another. So let's all be here for each other. And, on behalf of that, thank you all again for listening. And on behalf of Mary and I, stay safe and take care.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Great Women in Compliance. We hope you'll join us in honoring the great women in the compliance field by subscribing to this podcast and leaving a review.